All right, it is 6 p.m., Monday, June 3rd. I'm going to first call to order the Liquor Control Board meeting. Please join us in the Pledge of Allegiance, led by Deputy Mayor Thomas Redder.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. On the agenda this evening, we have one new conditional sidewalk permit for Scout at 3 East Allen Street.
Good evening.
Welcome, Jenny.
Hi. So this was a renewal, but actually I just received the remaining document that I was looking for, so it's no longer conditional.
Okay, great. Renewal, no changes. They've had seating out there for some time.
Correct.
All right, any questions from council?
Nope.
No.
Any questions from members of the public?
No.
Hearing no concern, I would entertain a motion to approve this sidewalk permit.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Charlie, second by Thomas. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you.
That is the end of our liquor control agenda. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Bryn, second by Charlie. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Motion carries. Meeting adjourned. It is 6:01 p.m. and I will call to order the Winooski City Council meeting. Agenda review is first. Any changes to the agenda this evening?
No.
No.
Okay, we will move on to public comment. Public comment is reserved for comments and questions on topics that are not included on the agenda. If you're here for an item on tonight's agenda, please wait for that item. We will have time for public comment on each agenda item. I believe we might have some public comment in the room.
We do. Yep.
All right. Please come forward to the microphone, state your name, and then you may make your comment.
Hi, my name is Gwendolyn Hageney. Some of you may very well be familiar with me at this point. I just have some comments about animal control and the handling of it in the city of Winooski. Just some numbers for you first. 463, the number of petition signatures I have received in 1 week. Requests from residents in the area for an animal control officer in the city of Winooski. Being the second most populous city in Vermont, many people echo my sentiment that we are long overdue for a full-time or at least 7-day-a-week animal control officer. 4, number of eyewitnesses to Luna's abuse. Many people are familiar with the case regarding Luna the pit bull, who has been abused for years, with various reports coming in over those years. And over the past 2 weeks alone, there have been 4+ eyewitness reports on this said abuse. 2, number of cats in my own backyard that I have had to trap, neuter, and place because there is no facility or agent in place to manage this because of the city's choice to eliminate our contract with the ACO. 6, number of cats left behind by an evicted family on Hickok Street. I called the police about this yesterday. They said that they were mildly aware of this and had contacted the landlord. The landlord insisted 3 of them were suddenly gone. 3 of them were set to be gone by Tuesday. I was told by an annoyed police officer, Allie, I don't remember her last name, that there was nothing that they were going to do about this, essentially, and that they would just report it to the ACO that we have some form of a contract with on Monday. I found this a little bit alarming since animal abuse and neglect also happens on Saturdays and Sundays, making the Monday through Friday issue kind of problematic. 2, number of times WPD hung up on me on 6/2/24 regarding this case. 5, number of days a week our potential ACO is available provided our chief approves it. Something I find kind of unacceptable. 1, number of city councilors who replied to my dozen or so emails and tags on both Gmail and various social medias. 7, number of days a week animal abuse, neglect, and stray lost dogs and cats are encountered by residents of Winooski. And then I did have 2 specific questions. Number 1, if a firsthand eyewitness statement isn't enough, to act on animal abuse that has been ongoing for years. Just curious what is. Don't feel like you have to answer that right away. Number 2, why isn't anyone dispatched when active animal cruelty is reported? Because it is actually a felony in our statutes. As many of you are aware, May 17th, Carmen Garofalo had a first-hand encounter with the individual abusing Luna for the past few years, where he was both threatening to her and her own dogs, as well as beating and kicking this dog that he had previously thrown out of his vehicle. She called this in right away. There was no response from WPD. Coming back to my community outreach, since some of our community members or managers are not available via social media, I took it upon myself to reach out to the community via Instagram, Facebook, Front Porch Forum. I have had dozens of responses of concerned citizens regarding nuisance reports, stray dogs and lost dogs that they have been told to, quote unquote, hang on to until the WPD has time to address it, which they often don't. These are often the owners are found, or the dogs are placed, or the dogs are surrendered to the community society by the residents themselves, something we just simply shouldn't have to do. There should be someone in place to manage this. A number of welfare requests that have gone unaddressed. Someone who states that there has been an individual with a dog living in an apartment above them that has been experiencing neglect for years, and he says he reports it more than annually, and absolutely nothing has been done. And so lastly, an ACO. Why do we need one? Because we're a real fucking city. We deserve one. And we pay out the ass for plenty of public services. I love living in Winooski. I am grateful to live in Winooski. I realize that I have quite a privilege living in an owned home in Winooski. But I also care about the city a lot, and I care about every living being in this city. There is no reason that animals matter any less than the people residents of Winooski. Everyone's quality of life is improved when everyone is being taken care of. Lastly, ACO and WPD, there needs to be a better marriage here. The current approach is wildly unacceptable. 10 hours a month of nuisance control for wildlife, fine. Approval beyond that by the chief of police is an enormously inefficient manner of handling this. And they've expressed this by their absolute distaste for my current interactions with them, because I've decided that I will report everything that I find and see, and that any issue that comes my way, because many of them are at this point, I'm going to report it to the WPD, because that is the current process. And I can tell you with certainty that I am wildly unpopular there because of this. Because they don't have the fucking time, and they're not interested in dealing with this. There should be somebody who, this is their job. This is what they're expected to handle. And yes, at the end of the day, WPD does need to do a better job of enforcement, a better job of managing all of these reports and cases and following through on them. There's no reason Luna needed to be abused for the past 4 years. Many people have reported this abuse. And Luna is not the only dog that is getting abused in Winooski. Every time I do my laundry, I see the dogs across the street being hit and kicked by their owners. Nothing's done. This is an unacceptable way to live for them, and it's an unacceptable way for me to live. I care about animals deeply, and I lose sleep over this, and I would rather pay slightly higher taxes and have an employee of the city whose job this exclusively is to manage than consistently be worried about every single animal in our community. Thank you.
Thank you, Gwendolyn. We will have staff follow up on the questions that you raised. Are there any additional folks here for public comment?
We do have another, yes.
Thank you so much. Clearly, we are very passionate and committed to Winooski, and we appreciate you all being here, and we appreciate your time. And
Before you get started, if you just say your full name.
yes, Jenny Rossi, resident of Winooski. Thank you.
Yep.
Clearly, we are passionate and committed to the welfare of all beings in Winooski. And I have the same questions that Gwen has. Title 13 BSA 352 does state that animals can be seized in the event of cruelty. I'm concerned with the overall response and overall education. Citywide, it's not the WPD's job to be animal control. I know there's a lot put on them. There's a lot put on you with the public response to this. And truly, we are just concerned. and this is a chronic issue. We are a big little city, and we have these big problems, and they aren't going to go away. They're just going to get worse. And I think we've tried to, as animal advocates in the area, to be that Band-Aid. But at this point, we're a Band-Aid over a bullet wound, and we can't do it all. And we just beg the city to step in and to help us help our community. Thank you.
Thank you. Any additional public comments? No other comments in the room?
If anyone is attending via Zoom, you can use the chat or raise hand feature if you wish to speak. Okay. Seeing no further comments, we'll move on to the consent agenda. We have for this evening the City Council Liquor Control Board and the Winooski Community Development Trust Board minutes from May 20, the payroll warrant from May 12 to 25, accounts payable May 29, subsequent to payout for April, and draft resolutions for World Refugee Day and Pride Month. Are there any questions from council?
No.
Do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Thomas, second by Aurora. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Motion carries. Thank you. We'll move on to council reports. Charlie, would you like to kick us off?
Sure, I'll be pretty quick. The Winooski Housing Commission meeting was moved from last Tuesday to tomorrow at 6 p.m. here at City Hall. That'll be the first time that we're meeting for all of May, so I'll have more of an update the next time council meets. Thanks.
Thank you. Bryn?
Sure. No updates for May. We have an airport commission meeting on Wednesday at 4 p.m. Hybrid is offered. Regular standing items for noise exposure map update, sound insulation program, and items related to noise impact from the F-35s. A Chinitsa Waste District meeting was rescheduled from May to June 5th due to lack of quorum. So Wednesday at 6 p.m. that hybrid meeting will be offered. We'll be reviewing contract proposals for the materials recycling facility. And we will have our regular June meeting as well on June 26th. That's the annual organizational meeting, and that will be hybrid as well. And we'll start at 6 p.m. The municipal infrastructure meeting is scheduled for Thursday, June 20th at 6:30 p.m. At the Myers Memorial Pool. We don't have an agenda for that just yet, but would anticipate posting that towards the end of next week. Those are my updates.
Thank you. Aurora?
Yeah, I don't have any big updates. Next week, June 13th, will be our meeting, the next meeting of the Inclusion and Belonging Commission. I do want to say that this commission is also looking for new members, and if anyone's interested, you can find information on the city's website about this commission and other commissions in the city. And if you have questions about inclusion and belonging specifically, you can reach out to myself, Jenny, the city clerk, and my email is ahurd@winooskivt.gov.
All right, thank you. Thomas?
Yeah, thank you. Also, no updates from my commissions as they meet later in the month. But I do want to remind everyone that downtown Winooski is doing Blingo tomorrow at Onion City Chicken and Oyster at 6 o'clock. And then also just an update, Councillor Oakleaf and I met last week with an amazing group of folks from Pakistan who were members of either the transgender community or who were part of organizations or police forces within Pakistan that are helping folks in the transgender and the LGBTQIA plus community. It was really great to meet with them. Some of them were counselors, which for those of you on council I haven't shared with, one of the counselors sits on a council with over 300 other members. So it was really great. I think they came to learn a lot from Councillor Oakleaf and I, but we also learned a ton from them. And they also presented us with a ceremonial gift that I will bring next time I am in council chambers. Thank you.
All right, thank you all. I have no updates to share this meeting, so we will move on to city updates.
Okay, so the Myers Memorial Pool opened yesterday. We're looking forward to a great summer. Passes are still available. To purchase passes or find out about programs, schedules, and all other information, visit winooskibt.gov/pool. And if you are looking to get more connected to our community and shape the city, we are seeking residents willing and able to serve and engage in the work of our boards, commissions, and committees for terms beginning July 1st, 2024. Current members may reapply, and residents not currently serving are welcome to apply. Residents with related experience, skill sets, and interests are encouraged to apply or ask questions about these opportunities. Council and staff also welcome diverse voices. If you've never served on a board, commission, or a committee for a municipality, we will do our best to support you. To learn more about each opportunity and to apply, visit the news update section of winooskibt.gov. The City of Winooski and Winooski School District have partnered with the Creative Discourse Group to stand up a temporary equity action committee charged with creating a special community event that addresses the findings of the City and Winooski School District joint equity audit. This committee includes members of the Winooski School District Anti-Racism Steering Committee, the city's Inclusion and Belonging Commission, and Chittenden County Regional Planning Commission Equity Advisory Committee, as well as other community leaders. The Equity Action Committee invites everyone to join us for Winooski Together, an event on equity action on Saturday, June 22nd, 2024 at 12 p.m. at the O'Brien Community Center. Designed to celebrate and activate more community members and address the findings of the Winooski Equity Audit, this event will include food, music, facilitated activities, and an award ceremony to recognize community change makers. For full details and to take the community survey, please visit winooskibt.gov/equityaction. No, it's one word. That's all for me.
All right, thank you. We are moving on to our regular items. First up, item A, introduction of amendments to Unified Land Use and Development Regulations, Act 47 updates. I do want to note that this is listed as on for discussion or approval. As the first introduction of these amendments to council, we will not be taking action on this item this evening. Eric, please lead us through.
The slate of amendments that are primarily focused on updating our land use regulations for consistency with Act 47, but also some of the amendments are tangential because of other updates that we made or other parts of statute. So there are additional items included in here that are not specifically related to Act 47, but do have some relation for our regulations. Tonight, what I was intending to do is just walk through the regulations to provide some general introduction to everything, not get into any detail unless you have specific questions that you want me to address tonight. Councilor Hurd did forward me a question that I will address for all of you momentarily, or I guess when we get to that section of the regulations. So this was discussed by the Planning Commission over many meetings for the past probably close to the last year. They held a public hearing at their regular meeting on May 23rd and voted to forward these amendments on to you all. So tonight, as I mentioned, we're doing the general overview. Ideally, this would come back to you on June 17th for a more detailed discussion and consideration of setting a public hearing. That's not a requirement, but that's kind of the goal that we're shooting for. So unless there's any questions, I'll just dive right in and start going through.
Sounds good.
Okay. I will note that the page numbers in this document don't always align. Some of them are repeated. That's just more from the formatting, so that will all get addressed before the amendments are finalized. The first section that has any significant changes is going to be in section 2.4 in our land use table. This is where some of the changes are going to be related to Act 47, specifically regarding multi-unit buildings of 3 and 4 dwellings. We've also kind of updated the regulations to remove a reference to a detached cottage. It's now just being covered under the accessory dwelling unit since it basically did the same thing. Some of the other changes in this section are related to statute and just having consistency with statutory language and then language in other parts of the regulations. For example, in our land use table, we use the term lodging establishment. In other sections, for example, the parking regulations, we called it, I believe, hotel, motel, bed and breakfast. So just some of the changes are in line with those types of elements. So there's some changes in the land use table, and also in the footnotes to kind of clarify what we're talking about. In section 2.5, this is where some of the big changes are coming in related to dimensional standards. Again, some of these are related to Act 47. Specifically, with Act 47, we're required to have a minimum density of 5 units per acre. So the maximum lot size we would be eligible to have to meet that requirement would be 8,712 square feet. So we've, through some analysis, a very long analysis, quite frankly, with the Planning Commission, looking at existing lot sizes, existing lot widths, existing lot depths, existing setbacks. We're proposing these updated regulations to reduce the overall lot size for pretty much all of the districts, the residential districts, reducing the setbacks in those districts and increasing the lot coverage in the residential A district. So the intent here was to better align our dimensional standards with conditions on the ground in our zoning districts. We're also updating the accessory structure dimensions to have primarily related to the building height, to have that better align and be really more of an accessory to the primary structure rather than in essence, having a second primary structure that we're just calling an accessory structure. In sections 2.6 through 214, it's really just some cleanup or some additional detail on the districts themselves and kind of the purpose of each district, primarily again related to the residential districts, and adding some additional language on the number of possible lots per acre to kind of also reflect the gradation in those 3 residential districts and the requirements of Act 47 to show that we are in fact meeting those standards, the density standards that are included. Next is Article 3, and Article 3 is specific only to the downtown core zoning district. So it has its own set of regulations for just about everything that are independent of the rest of the regulations. So the question that Councilor Hurd raised was in section 3.6 specifically, we're including bicycle parking as well as having the same regulations in section 4.12 and asking what the differences are. There's no difference between the regulations other than the references, the internal references, and again, because the information in section 3.6 is specific to the downtown core, we wanted to make sure that we were reflecting the same standards in the downtown as we were in the rest of the city. So it's all the same information, just we needed a new reference.
Okay, perfect, thank you.
Yep, absolutely, absolutely. So just some updates to the, excuse me, some updates to the uses really related to the language. The big change in this section, again, related to Act 47, is we're basically eliminating all of our minimum parking for the downtown core except for residential uses and lodging establishments. Those would be the only ones that would be required to have parking associated with the facility. These could still be located in a municipal structure, or they could be on site. But for all the rest of the uses that are allowed in the downtown core, between the on-street parking, between our existing Cascades garage, and between the new Abenaki garage, we're anticipating that there should be enough parking to support all the uses, especially given the nature of the parking, that it's intended for more of a higher turnover. So we're eliminating the parking requirements for all the uses except for residential and lodging establishments. As I mentioned, we're including bicycle parking in the downtown core as well. This is the same language that was previously approved by the council in section 4.12. Just now we're adding it so that the downtown core has similar standards as well. There's some other cleanup just for clarity on the provisions as well for permitting and things of that nature. Next is Article 4. We're providing some clarification on access drives and where driveways can be located and how they can be structured. There was some questions regarding the separation for the multi-unit and non-residential driveways. We're now just having 2 categories. One is for residential driveways, one is for non-residential driveways. There are some other standards that will apply outside of these basic requirements in our site planning requirements under section 6.6. So this is really more just kind of a general guidance for most of our residential driveways that we'll be seeing. We're adding new language under section 4.3 for the conversion or change of use, specifically to identify that if a use is listed as permitted in our regulations and there's no new square footage proposed, no new dwelling units, and the use does not require site plan approval, then there's no need to have a zoning permit. This comes up a lot actually in our downtown core, for example, where a good example is Standing Stone Wines, the new business that's on the east side of the circle. They originally opened as a retail establishment and wanted to start serving food and in essence become a restaurant type of use. So not changing anything else except the use itself. So instead of having them go through the whole zoning process again, allowing that type of a situation to just change their use because it's a permitted use, that they're going from one permitted use to another permitted use and not changing anything about the property. So it's a way to help existing storefronts change uses without needing to go through a whole zoning process, provided they're not making any specific changes to the building itself. In section 4.12, parking requirements, we're making some updates for Act 47 again with the number of spaces that we can require. Also changing or just updating the language for consistency throughout the rest of the document. You'll see that reflected in both the minimum vehicle parking table and the minimum bicycle parking table. We're also eliminating the dimensional requirements for parking spaces. There was a bill moving its way through the legislature this session that had some language limiting the size of parking spaces. So I don't believe it made it into the final version of the bill, but in response to that, we wanted to take this language out and just reference public works standards so that those standards can change without having to update our land use regulations completely. We're also adding in a provision for compact vehicle spaces, which we did not previously have. A lot of the changes that you'll see, or I should say the article that sees the most changes is going to be Article 5. We've changed almost every section in here for one reason or another. Section 5.1 is related to ADUs. The first part of it is really cleanup. The second part is to reflect the removal of a detached cottage as a use. So now it's an ADU that does not meet the standards, the statutory standards of being a single unit owner occupied dwelling. So this still allows for an ADU just in those other circumstances and does not have that separate process for a detached cottage. Section 5.2, most of this is changes based on state statute, existing statute, not Act 47 related, just for consistency with how the state is defining family child care homes, family child care facilities, and daycare facilities. So really just for consistency there. The next several sections are really just for some clarity, with the exception of section 5.4 for garage sales. We're proposing to take all this language out. There's never been, in the time that I've been here, any issues with garage sales. Nobody's ever applied for a permit for a garage sale. The way that this would be treated if it's an ongoing issue is that would become more of either a change of use to it's where more of a commercial use or home occupation, and we can look at those situations under different sections of the regulations. So the weekend garage sale can happen without having to go through any type of permitting or review by the city, just for folks to have a sale on their property.
Would there ever be an instance where there's disagreement between the zoning administrator and the code enforcement?
Currently, I would say no, because it's the same person for the land use regulations. Mm-hmm. So the complaint would come into the zoning administrator, and they would be in charge of the enforcement as well. Okay. Moving on, the other sections are again more just clarification and consistency with language internal to the document. Under section 5.10, there's a couple of statutory requirements from Act 47 that are added. So having emergency shelters as a protected use and the existing state-owned or operated institutional facilities as one of those protected uses as well. Changing some language under temporary structures in section 5.12 to the previous language, quite honestly, didn't make sense to me, and I wasn't really sure how to enforce it. So what we're really looking at now is a temporary structure really being that, is where it's, for example, a tent that you might set up on your property for a special event. It's really intended to be a very short-term proposition. If it's more than that, then it becomes a structure of some kind and can be regulated again under other sections of the statutes.
And it is clear what timeframes we're talking about?
I believe yes, it is if anything that's more than 30 days would need to go through a different permitting process.
Thank you.
The next set of changes that related-ish to Act 47 are in section 5.14. This is where we have our priority housing. So we had to make some changes. Act 47 actually preempted some of our incentives for unit mix and the number of units that could be included in a single building. So we had to make some updates for that provision. We've also added in some additional lot coverage allowances for priority housing. There's a section on bonus stories that is part of Act 47 that we are including here and removing it from another part of the regulations. Primarily it was related to the Gateway District, but we're adding it in under the priority housing because it relates mostly to affordable housing. We're also adding in a new section on administrative review for included to allow for projects that meet the standards or specific standards to go through an administrative review process rather than a site plan review process. We are also including a requirement that along with these additional density bonuses that there is a certain percentage of the property that remain as what we're calling common open space, so that we're ensuring some level of set aside for open space on the properties that take advantage, I should say, the density bonuses, sorry, the lot coverage bonuses and the common open space requirements are only going to apply with the priority housing. So if it's just a standard development, there's no allowance for the additional lot coverage. That would still remain at the lot coverage maximums outlined in section 2.5, which the maximum we're proposing right now is 50%. The residential B and residential C districts already are at 50% lot coverage. We're proposing to move the residential A up to 50% as well. So outside of the priority housing, there would be no incentives for additional lot coverage.
And I believe at the Planning Commission, they discussed a little bit more detail what common open space should be.
Yes, and that's reflected in this draft as well, primarily in the definitions and the definition of common open space.
Thank you.
The next section is Article 9, the definitions. Here we're including some new definitions and just clarifying some existing definitions. Many of these are based on Act 47. So for example, you'll see a new definition for dwelling units, for multi-dwelling units, for emergency shelters, common open space, as was just discussed, some other statutory definition updates, for example, the family child care facility, things like that. So definitions that we did not have for terms that we were using, or other definitions that just needed to be updated and clarified. I do want to bring attention to a change that we're proposing for a neighborhood restaurant, what was previously, or what currently is called a restaurant cafe. We're changing it to a restaurant neighborhood, but also proposing to eliminate the limitation or the prohibition that those uses cannot serve alcoholic beverages. The discussion that we had around that topic was, in most of these instances, if they're not serving alcohol, you're allowed to bring your own. So it didn't seem like it was doing anything to limit the use itself from serving alcohol. So we are eliminating that language in that definition as well. The next portion of the regulations where we're going to see some changes is in the Gateway Zoning District. So The first change here is with the bonus story provision. We are eliminating the language here and just referencing back to section 5.14, where the bonus story is now applicable to other districts. So that is one of the changes. We're cleaning up some of the siting and use requirements in the detached frontage building form standard. And then some of the other changes, those are really the ones that are focused on Act 47. The other changes in this section are really related to some issues that have come up over the years, really more for clarification and for consistency. So under section 604 with roofs and parapets, we currently have a provision where in the Gateway District that the roof, the attic story, is not subject to the height or story requirements. What we found, however, is that some of the designs that people have proposed have what we call a mansard roof, which is a very tall-sided attic structure, to the point where they're able to put, in essence, use that as an additional story. So we put a provision in here that says that if they're proposing a roof of a certain pitch, it will count as their overall building height, so that they're not inadvertently or purposefully getting an additional story because it's in the attic. So we're trying to correct that.
Is that, just for clarification, is that conditioned, or does it matter if it's conditioned or non-conditioned space?
That's correct, yes. If they're proposing that type of a roof style, then yes, it would be subject to the height requirements. Generally, when they're doing that, it's because they're proposing living space. Or let me rephrase. All the examples that I've seen are all proposing living space.
Okay, thank you.
The next section is on signage, really just some clarification on lighting for signs. We didn't have any language previously on sign lighting, so adding in some language on lighting for signage. Also clarifying in the section on mechanical lighting and mechanical equipment. There's a provision right now that basically says you can't have any mechanical equipment on the street space of the building. So dryer vents, dryer or air intakes, things of that nature. We're still keeping that provision in, but we are allowing for any infrastructure related to life safety. So the fire department connection, where they're going to hook up their fire hose to support the sprinklers in the building, the strobe lights that go with those. We want to give the fire department the opportunity to propose the location of their infrastructure in the best place for a life safety concern. So we wanted to exempt that type of infrastructure from being in the street space, as long as it's not blocking the sidewalk. So that can be put on the front of the building if necessary. And based on some of the laws and statutes that I'm aware of, they can already do that as the agency having jurisdiction. So this is really just to clarify that if the fire department wants that infrastructure in a location, they can have it, as long as it's not blocking the sidewalk in any way. And then the final change is just there was language previously on the affordable housing bonus story provision and some of the requirements of that. We're eliminating that because, again, statute with Act 47 has language proposed that has to be included. So that is a general overview of the regulations that we're proposing to change and what those changes look like. While there is a lot of red line in here, I think most of it is for clarification or new language that's needed for Act 47. So happy to try to answer any questions you might have generally now, or also I would just say that given that my time here is short with the city, if any of you want to discuss these changes separately as well in advance of the next meetings, I'm happy to meet with you one-on-one to have those conversations.
Thank you, Eric. Councilor Oakley, if you would mind facilitating any questions from council, and Thomas and I can use the raise hand feature if we wish to speak.
Would either of you like to ask questions first?
I had my biggest one already answered.
Okay. I had a question about the gateway.
Sure.
Recall within the last few years, there have been complaints about limited setbacks of multi-story buildings from sidewalks, and I'm wondering if any of this proposed ordinance changes will address that.
So nothing that's currently proposed. We did, with a previous amendment, allow for for a certain percentage of buildings that are over a certain width to be set back from the what's the required building line as it's indicated in the regulations, up to 8 feet off the sidewalk. So generally the required building line, all buildings need to be built to that line, which is for the most part coexistent with the front property boundary, the street side property boundary. So we did include a provision several amendments ago that does allow for a portion of the building to be set back up to 8 feet from that line to provide some separation from the sidewalk and also allow for some additional interest in the architectural design, give some more flexibility. Given some of the slopes of the city and where the Gateway District is located, some of the architectural components have been it's been hard to meet some of the standards with the strict interpretation of the regulations. So we did incorporate that setback to address some of the architectural concerns and to give the sidewalk a little bit more space.
And do we have a different sidewalk width standard in the Gateway than we do in the other districts?
Not specifically. So the Gateway District, none of the land use regulations apply to the city right-of-way. So the sidewalk standards are going to be handled either through Public Works or through other analyses and review of the corridors. So as far as how those sidewalks will be built, with the caveat of making sure that they meet ADA standards.
The reason why I ask is knowing that we have challenges with snow removal in the winter and knowing that there doesn't tend to be a green belt, and thinking about how wide the sidewalks may or may not be, especially in the Gateway as it relates to snow clearing, snow removal, and the challenges that are often faced by the DPW with keeping up with plowing, especially sidewalk plowing. I know outside of the Gateway District, there are, when the sidewalks aren't plowed, people walk in the street.
Right.
Obviously, that's not something we want as an option for the Gateway District especially.
So yes, and I would respectfully like to amend my previous answer about the setbacks. So the required building line is generally on the front property boundary for our urban general and urban storefront building form standard, which primarily is along Main Street. So with the Main Street revitalization plan, that is going to address some of those sidewalk concerns and snow storage issues. The East Allen Street corridor and the Mallett's Bay corridor transition from urban general close in to the townhouse small apartment, and then on Mallett's Bay Avenue to the detached frontage. The required building line in the townhouse small apartment and the detached frontage are they're generally about 5 feet behind the required, behind that property boundary, or up to 10 feet behind that property boundary. So those building form standards do have a setback built in that's greater than what we're seeing on the Main Street corridor. And that's mostly where we're seeing a lot of the development is on the Main Street corridor. So yes, there are setbacks built in addition to the ones that we included to allow for some offsets of the buildings.
Okay. And then in addition to like snow storage, that is also the, kind of going back to previous comments about just the general, the only phrase I can think to describe it is look and feel of the city, and feeling a little overwhelmed by having large multi-story structures right up against the sidewalk. So
Yep.
that's why I bring that up, to see if there's anything else here, but glad that we've kind of addressed that previously and there isn't anything else needed. Any other questions? Okay. I have more questions, but I'll see if either the mayor or deputy mayor do.
I have a quick question. More just, I believe we all received an email from a resident with concerns about what could happen to trees in the city. And given that we are technically a tree city, I just wanted to check in with Eric and see, Eric, what your thoughts are on that, and if the Planning Commission has thought of future tree planting or existing trees as we make these edits, and if there's a way to make sure that we are not cutting down too many trees, etc., as we go into this. And then also, I know that this was mostly focused on aligning with Act 47, but just wondering if the commission had thought into further incentives to go further than what Act 47 is asking us to do, or if that will be in a next stage of this. Thanks.
Yeah, so regarding the email, and I believe that was sent out today to all the councilors and mayor about concerns about losing street trees or not having street trees and kind of issues related to trees in general. So I would say with the land use regulations, again, that the right of way falls outside of the purview of these regulations. So anything within that right of way area, whether it be green belt or street trees or sidewalks or parking or bike lanes, is really going to be up to the purview primarily of Public Works. With that said, the right of ways in the city are fairly narrow for the most part on a lot of the roads, between 40 and 50 feet wide. And so there's a lot of competition for that space, and ensuring that there's enough area to properly have a tree or to have a sidewalk or a bike lane or parking is really going to be dependent on the roadway itself. Several years ago, the city did adopt an ordinance related to public trees and the maintenance and cutting of the public trees. So a lot of the maintenance and whether a tree remains or does not would be covered under those ordinances. In the land use regulations, we do have some standards for landscaping that does apply to, I'll say, to larger projects. There's some exemptions for anything of 3 units or less are exempt from our landscape regulations. Having said that, units of, I think, 3 units or more need to go through a site planning review with the Development Review Board. Those uses are required to review the landscape regulations in our ordinance, which does include some standards on the size of trees that need to be included. It doesn't get as specific as what can be removed, but it does allow for existing trees to be used towards the landscaping requirements. So I think a lot of it's going to depend on the private property owner and what they want to do with the trees on their own site. And at this point, we don't really have specific standards that address removal of trees on private property, just removal of trees on public property. But we do have requirements for landscaping to be added in certain circumstances.
To Thomas's second question, there is
yes.
intention to for Planning Commission to work further on housing incentives via the work that they're doing with the Housing Commission right now.
Thank you for that. Yes, so the Planning Commission is working on regulations in conjunction with the Housing Commission on inclusionary zoning and replacement regulations. So that will address some additional priority housing items, or is intended to do that. So there's always time or always an opportunity for the Planning Commission to continue reviewing and evaluating the regulations to see if changes should be made because something is not working or is not really an incentive, or you just want to require something else. There's always an opportunity to do that. It just is a matter of getting that into the Planning Commission's work program and having the time to review the regulations.
Great, thank you, Mark.
Yeah, and that's helpful to know, because the one other concern that I had is kind of reviewing this was one, I'm glad that these incentives can stack, because I do worry sometimes that folks will take the green energy or the sound mitigation over affordable housing. Mm-hmm. So glad to hear that, and that there is that additional movement.
Yeah, and I guess to that point, Counselor, the sound mitigation and the green building only applies to projects in the gateways.
Gotcha.
So the bonus story now applies to anywhere else. I should say the bonus story now applies to affordable housing projects as defined by statute, which by my calculations, are projects that are going to have at least 25 units in it to meet either the 5-unit or 20% minimum requirement for an affordable housing project. So that bonus story provision is now available for any district that would allow for that, but the sound mitigation and green building is only for the gateway.
Okay, that's very helpful. Thank
Yep.
you.
During the planning commission, there were some public comments that raised concerns about increasing density where it's already, the neighborhood's already facing some of the highest density. I kind of came in late to the conversation, so I missed the specifics, if that was residential A already, that has a higher density point. But can you just go into some of the thoughts? Is that because it's mandated by Act 47, or are there other contributing factors?
So the density question specifically is partially being mandated by Act 47. We have to allow up to 5 units per acre in anywhere that we have water and wastewater, and allow for a single unit dwelling. So that's the provision in Act 47 that we have to respond to, which was the impetus for reducing reducing the minimum lot sizes in all of the residential zoning districts. The other part of that, which may lead to some increased density, is the reduction further of the lot sizes in the residential B and C district. That was done mostly to align with what's out there now. A lot of the properties in our residential districts are currently non-conforming because they do not meet either the lot size, the lot frontage, or the lot depth, or a combination of all three. So through a very extensive analysis, we, as the Planning Commission, determined that it would be appropriate to look at reducing the overall lot sizes to better match what's on the ground. With that said, the density, while we're allowing for more units based on Act 47, the lot coverages are not changing except for the residential A, the lot coverage maximums, unless you're doing priority housing. So while we're allowing for more units, we're not allowing for additional coverage of the property.
Okay.
So the lot coverage requirements and setbacks and parking requirements are still going to have some check on the amount of density that could be put on a property, even though we have reduced the minimum lot size. So unless a project is being proposed with priority housing, there's not going to be any additional lot coverage.
Okay, thank you for the clarification. I may ask what seems to be a silly question, but when you say align with what's out there now, so in having reviewed some of the history of the ordinances that were put in place to address the nonconformity, we're now going towards authorizing that, but formally. Is that correct?
I'm not sure I fully understand your question.
So I believe 20, 30 decades ago now. Some of the ordinances were, I believe it was likely in the 90s when some of the ordinances were modified to have more conforming lots and more conforming spaces and setbacks. So you have said several times aligning with what's out there.
Sure. Okay.
So just the phrasing is a little confusing of like, so are we allowing lack of conformity or cohesion, I guess, of the districts by reviewing and approving of the proposed changes?
So I guess, okay, I think I understand your question. So the bulk of the city was laid out many, many years ago, before we had land use regulations.
Yep.
I think in the past, and I don't know this is pure speculation, there was an effort to establish lot sizes more consistent with what was preferred at the time. For the most part, minimum lot sizes really only impact subdivision. So if the lots are already existing, the minimum lot size that's in the regulations only matters if a new lot is being created. So the existing lots would all be considered pre-existing nonconformities and be allowed to be developed and remain as they are. So what we're doing now with these changes is really based off of analysis of the existing lots in the city, in the residential districts in particular, to see what's actually out there on the ground, and trying to bring more of those properties into conformity rather than having a bulk of them be non-conforming and remain non-conforming.
Okay. Thanks for the clarification there.
So as an example, part of the analysis we did was in the residential C zoning district, the current minimum lot size is 7,500 square feet. Only 54% of the lots in that district are 7,500 square feet or more, where we're proposing a 3,000 square foot lot size that makes 96% of the lots conforming at 3,000 square feet. Just on the lot size itself. There might still be some issues with lot width and lot depth. I believe, I just looked at this earlier, in the residential C district in particular, the average frontage width is like 32 feet of frontage. So we're still going to have non-conforming lots based on the lot frontage requirement, but we will have a lot fewer that will be non-conforming overall. And similarly with the residential A and residential B districts, similar scenarios there.
Okay, thanks. Do you have two more questions? They might be a little easier than that one, sorry. With increased density and changes to lot sizes, will that have any concerns or raise any issues with health and safety, fire, mitigation?
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't believe it will, because the uses are still going to be limited to, I think the lots are going to be constrained enough that there will be limitations to what can be built on the properties. Meaning that I don't anticipate we're going to see a large influx of new development on these small lots just because there's not enough lot area. You have to keep in mind, or one of the things that I talked a lot about with the Planning Commission is that for the most part, these lots are already developed. So in most cases, there's an existing dwelling that's in the center of the property. So to add new units, you would have to go behind the property, which means you have to extend the driveway further back, which means that you might be in the setbacks. The lots are, again, going to be more narrow, so the existing dwelling might already be encroaching in the setbacks. Even though we're reducing the setbacks, any new development would need to meet the setback requirements, so they can't build to the same width of what might be there now. Mm-hmm. So I think, and the lot coverage maximum is going to restrict a lot of the development as well. So a lot of the smaller lots that we have are already over their lot coverage maximums, mm-hmm. So we're not going to see any new units there, potentially. Some of the other properties, the most we would see as a by right basis as an administrative right, an administrative approval, the most right now that we would be able to do is 2 units. So anything above 2 units would need to go through site plan review, which is going to then get comments from emergency services and public works, community services, all the standard folks that we reach out to for site plan.
Okay. Yeah, because I'm thinking about some various properties in the city where there might be 2 feet between the 2 structures.
Right.
And curious if that would be an instance that would occur again under these new proposed ordinance changes, and if that would then require increased like firewall material between the buildings, things like of that nature.
Sure. Yep. So we are reducing setbacks in some instances, and actually I should say in all of our residential districts, we are looking at reducing the setbacks but the smallest we're going to is 5 feet, which is consistent with a lot of the developments out there. So that would be 5 feet on each side of the property. So a 10-foot separation between two new structures. So even if we had an example where there was a building that was 2 feet from the property boundary now, if they put an addition on it, that addition would have to remain at least 5 feet from the property boundary. So we wouldn't be adding new structures that were closer or as close as they are now if they're encroaching in the setbacks without some sort of relief, which then has to go to the Development Review Board. And again, review by other agencies as well, or other city departments as well.
And to just dive into that a little bit more, and 5 feet is adequate for the fire department for not having additional fire-rated walls or materials?
I believe so. For the most part, the separation from buildings is, I want to say 5 or 10 feet, which if you did the 5 foot, you'd have 5 foot on each side. The other part of it too, I should mention, if you're adding on to an existing building, chances are anything that's more than one unit, we consider a public building and requires state permitting. So the state would be reviewing the construction methods and means, and there are standards for proximity to adjacent buildings in both construction and openings, like windows and things, need to be a certain distance from an adjacent structure. So yes, other mechanisms in place to address those concerns.
Great. Along the lines of the mayor's question and deputy mayor's question about added incentives, when you look at an aerial view and boundary lines of many of the parcels and properties, they're long, skinny, narrow lots.
Yep.
Not that there's an easy way to go about it, but has there been any consideration to having basically a right-of-way created between the parcels to mimic some larger cities where they have an alleyway in the back that allow for parking in the back or additional access? Would there in any way be benefit to exploring that as a way to increase density without, with the existing, I guess, conditions that are already out there?
Yeah, I mean, I think it is a very interesting question, and it's something that I have loosely looked at, especially with some of the properties over, I believe, like on Hickok and West Street, where they're very deep lots,
Yep.
175 feet or so deep. They're narrow, but if there was a way to get some kind of an alley in behind them, you could, in essence, have another property that's fronting off another street somehow.
Right.
That gets into a lot of different issues with private property rights. What we are, however, creating, and I think we'll kind of get to that same idea, is because we're reducing, or we're proposing to reduce the minimum lot size, it does create additional opportunities for planned unit developments. So we can have additional buildings set further back on the property, and they would have a shared access off of where the property currently fronts onto a public street. A good example of that is on West Allen Street right now. There's a planned unit development that's being built currently. It happened obviously before any of this was being discussed. That's adding two new dwellings on an existing property for 3 total. The new dwellings will each have 3 bedrooms in them, and I believe they're all going to be offered for sale. So that's an example of how a planned unit development was able to be done with a shared access and providing additional housing on a lot that may not otherwise support that type of development.
Gotcha.
Definitely something to explore, though, I think.
Yeah.
I'm not sure that we're ready to add new streets to the city, but it would definitely create some opportunities.
Yeah. Again, just thinking about the constraints of the current lots and exploring, additional opportunities that, may not be easy, but may be
Right.
beneficial. So I thought I'd bring it up. Those are my questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any further questions? No other questions in the council?
Well, let's open for public comment and questions. Is there anyone in chambers that wishes to
Hi, everybody. My name is Lucas Pelletier. I am a Winooski resident. I live off of LaFountain Street in one of the new subdivisions off Molly's Way. And I am, first of all, very grateful for all of your time and all of your efforts to move toward housing equity and transit equity in our city. So I really appreciate that. Some concerns that I've been having in this type of, with the current topic that we're on, are perhaps what might happen with the old National Guard post at the end of LaFountain Street. Perhaps that could be an opportunity for a pretty robust housing mixed-use building, perhaps even a garage underneath. I'm not sure if there are contaminants since the demolition of the site. I'm just thinking kind of along the lines of the density discussion that we are talking about. And also want to thank you for all of your work with the LaFountain-Dion corridor scoping study. I'm really looking forward to the sidewalk improving and the transit equity in that corridor as well. So I'm curious to know if there are any developments with the old National Guard post.
Thanks for the questions.
Thanks, Lucas. Yeah, thanks, David. I can say that the National Guard is doing complete environmental mitigation on that site once they are done with demolition. And we have had some early talks with them and a nonprofit developer about potential future uses to add some priority housing in that space. This is something that should be in an upcoming agenda. Once the discussion is a little firmer, we will bring it forward for public transparency.
Thank you so much. I'm really looking forward to it.
Thank you, Lucas. We don't have any other individuals for public comment in chambers.
We will move to Zoom then and bring Amy on.
Hello. Can you see me?
We can, but we can hear you.
Okay, great. I guess I just wanted to follow up on the letter that I sent that Eric summarized, and just to, I guess, clarify that my concern is really for the trees in the back on private property, as I know there's a lot of towns that require, if you take away a 36-inch caliper tree, you need to put back so many caliper of tree. Because my concern is that as we densify these communities and the RC district, and really all of them, most of the trees are actually in the back because we don't have many street trees. I guess that was the concern, that if we had a bunch of street trees, I guess I wouldn't be as concerned if they could remove some of the trees in the backyards where they will be developing. But we don't have many street trees, so it makes it even more pressing that those trees, that we have a tree coverage in the back. And I'm not opposed to totally redeveloping the areas. It's just, I feel that there needs to be more thought as we plan moving forward. So thinking about stormwater as well, if you are basically you're doubling your lots, the amount of lots that can actually happen in the RC by, decreasing the size of them in half. And then to what I understand, you're increasing potentially up to 65% impervious. You're going to be dealing with stormwater issues as well. So I guess I just want to make sure that we're looking at all the different issues moving forward, so that we're not stuck with something we don't want down the road and it's too late. So that's really, I guess, my concerns. If that makes sense.
Yeah, thanks for the clarity on your comment, Amy.
Yeah.
Noted, we do have tree ordinance on public trees, not in private trees.
Right.
Eric, do you want to speak at all to the concerns about stormwater?
I'd say the From the development side, again, we're only allowing for increases in lot coverage with priority housing. Those priority housing increases, I believe, are all tied to planned unit developments. So there would be a review by the Development Review Board in those instances, which would include discussion from the, information on stormwater from Public Works. Generally, those stormwater is typically captured on site in those situations through underground containment of some form that is then allowed to infiltrate into the soil over time. The city does also have a separate storm sewer system, so it's not a combined system like in other communities around us. We do have specific requirements and limitations on what we can actually discharge to the river based on our MS4 permitting, our municipal storm separate sewer system permitting through the state. So we're very conscious of what we are putting into our storm sewers and issues with runoff. So I would like to think that that would all be addressed quite significantly and dealt with in those instances that are going to require the additional review and approval. So the land use regulations do have some stormwater controls, but it really only applies to larger projects. So in most cases, we're going to be seeing stormwater addressed with those larger projects through the zoning regulations anyway, which are all going to, again, require some sort of input from Public Works. Outside of doing a planned unit development with priority housing, the lot coverage is still going to be capped at 50%. So at least half of the lot will have to remain uncovered, for lack of a better term. So that will also help with the infiltration of stormwater on site instead of running off.
All right, thank you. Council?
Can I follow up with a question?
Oh, sure.
I was just curious if, I understand that 50% of the lot will stay as impervious, but I guess I was just wondering if the lot became subdivided into two, pretty much because the lot size has decreased. Can you subdivide it into two if most of the impervious it's greater than 50%? Do you see what I'm saying? Like if you say we just cut off the backyard, which is all lawn, and made that a separate lot, but the front lot would have higher than 50% cover, could you still, I guess, subdivide and make that back
So
a lot and then add 50% to that?
if I'm understanding the question, I would say no, because you can't subdivide a property if it doesn't. So first of all, both properties would need to meet the minimum dimensional standards, which does include the lot coverage. So both properties would need to have road frontage, would need to meet the minimum lot depth, would need to meet the minimum area, and also the maximum coverage. The existing property, if there's any structures, they would also need to meet setback requirements as well. So the subdivision for the deeper lots, subdivision would require road frontage, which most of those wouldn't have.
Unless it's a PUD.
Unless it's a planned unit development, in which case they still need to meet the maximum lot coverage requirements for the project.
Okay. And following up on Amy's question, so I didn't quite hear an answer in there about trees on private properties and replacement ordinance.
Yeah, so we don't currently have any type of replacement regulations for trees. We do, like I said, we do have requirements for landscaping with projects, but it doesn't apply to anything that's less than 3 units. So, which is when it comes into a site planning requirement. So that is something we can look at to change with the landscaping standard, but currently we don't have anything in our regulations, in the land use regulations, about replacement of existing trees over a certain size or just in general.
And then landscaping, would that definition include trees?
It does. There are specific requirements for shade trees and the minimum caliper they need to be with those landscaping requirements. So we do have specific standards on landscape requirements. We also have requirements on buffering when there's two uses that are not necessarily compatible. As far as for example, something in the central business district being adjacent to something in the residential district, requiring a buffer with specific planting requirements in a certain size. So we do have those types of requirements in our regulations. But again, most of these standards only apply for projects that have more than 3 dwelling units associated with it.
Okay.
Which I should also say, in most cases, or even with the changes that we're proposing, would still require some level of site plan review, which is then going to put the landscape requirements into place as well.
Okay, thank you.
Can I just say one more thing? Sorry.
Go ahead, Amy.
I just wanted to thank you guys because you're doing a great job and I do appreciate it. I'm a landscape architect and so I have to analyze it all. But I do think it's very interesting that how much benefits trees do provide to an urban community. I'm just doing a plug for that so that guys should look at those links that I sent, and it's actually very critical, and a lot of cities are looking at preserving their trees right now. So that's all.
Thank you for that.
You guys have a good night.
Thanks, Amy.
Thanks, Amy.
Thank you.
Yeah.
All right. So we will move on. Thank you for the overview, Eric. Only discussion for this item tonight.
Very much.
We will move on to item B, on for discussion or approval, grant acceptance, fiscal agent Better Places grant. Angela, please introduce.
Hello, Melissa Corbin is here if council has additional questions. Melissa reached out to the city. As you all are aware, they did a significant amount of fundraising for this grant and fundraised over $15,000 towards the match portion. But due to unforeseen circumstances, they are not currently eligible to receive the grant award and have asked the city to step in as a fiscal agent to act on their behalf. We are an eligible entity to receive the funds, and because this is improvements to existing city infrastructure and a partner agency that we work with, we are very much aligned with the outcomes of this grant and do not see any issues with acting as fiscal agent. We have drafted a subrecipient agreement with Downtown Winooski, outlining all of the provisions of the grant and requiring their compliance. We would just be responsible for any response to the grantor. Pretty straightforward.
Thanks, Angela. I was waiting for the mayor to direct. I have one question. If there's a certain level of reporting needed or intervals where there's certain level of if like when payment would be received, if the city would need to basically need to front any money before receiving reimbursement.
Nope. So on the grant agreement, the grant application cover sheet that was included in the packet, it outlines the grant requirements. A portion of the grant is upfront. 85% is submitted to the city immediately upon grant execution, and the remainder is given at project completion. And we are going to be reimbursing Downtown Winooski as they submit the documentation that is going to the grantor. So there should not be any need for the city to come out of pocket for this. It will all be grant funds.
Thank you.
My one question is just to double check that we checked with our lawyers, because I know last time, well, not similar to this, but just making sure.
This is a pretty common grant agreement. We have used subrecipient monitoring grants before. This just basically plugs the terms from the existing grant agreement into a subrecipient and places those requirements with downtown Winooski. We've entered into subrecipient grants before, so this is not an unusual circumstance.
Perfect, thank you.
Do you have questions? No additional questions from chambers? Actually, do you have public comment? No public comment at this time.
Is there anyone on Zoom who wishes to ask a question or make public comment? Okay. So I don't think I'm hearing concern from council. Would someone like to make a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Aurora, second by Charlie. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thanks, Angela. Thanks, Melissa. That is the end of our regular agenda. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
Second.
Motion by Bryn, second by Charlie. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries and meeting adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.